Hello and welcome to the Code Mavens channel. My name is Gabor Sabo and I'm teaching Rust and Python usually. In this video, we are going to start learning about FastAPI, the one that you can see on the screen. Actually, it's going to be probably a series of videos because this one is going to only show the Hello World application. In quick note, what FastAPI is a web framework in order to allow you to build a web application. Basically, you are creating something that will return, in most cases, JSONs to the user. So providing basically the backend of a web application. In order to get started, let's switch to the terminal where we can see that I already created a file called requirements, where we listed all the requirements that we need for this example. The first one is the FastAPI with all its extensions or whatever. And then we also need PyTest because I personally very much in favor of writing tests as you go and even as you learn, definitely as you develop some application. I don't say that you should write it before you write the code, but definitely close to when you're writing the code. So we already have the requirements file. We need to set up some environment. So virtual environment, I'm going to use virtual env to set up Python 3 and env. This will create a Python 3, create a folder where we're going to be able to install all these dependencies. And I need to start it, env, then activate. And I usually do this before I start the editor, because then the editor will know about all these installations. So, or actually the environment. So I can all these other installations later. So I can start the editor now. And hopefully we get to the editor, right? Yes. And then I can open a terminal. And in this terminal, I can already run. If I check it, which Python, you will already see that inside now it knows about the Python environment that we have just created and started. So now we can pip install -ar requirements.txt, and this will install all those requirements. Fine. What do we need in the code? Actually, if you look at here, you can see that it's there are yellow curlies under the name FastAPI in the from, because it didn't know about FastAPI at that point yet. It wasn't installed. But now, it's just changed, because by this time FastAPI was installed, and now the Visual Studio Code noticed it, and so now there are no curlies. Fine. That's just a side note, actually. This is the source code we have. And just quickly go over the source code, reloading, importing this FastAPI class from the FastAPI library, and then we creating an instance of it, which we can call anything, but the default or standard or whatever is calling it up. And this will represent our application. And then we need to map every possible routes, every possible request to some function. And so this is the default example also in the tutorial that comes with FastAPI. We create a function, actually an asynchronous function, which we can call anything. Here we are going to call it root. And then this will return just some data structure that can be converted into JSON. So this is just a dictionary with a key and a value. We can return any dictionary here, but this is just the basic. Okay, so we need to create such a function, and then we also need to add a decorator using this @up. So the up, this name, this is the same name, right? And then say that this is going to handle a GET request going to the root of the application, so slash. The name root here doesn't matter. We can actually change it to any name. The name of the function doesn't matter. Obviously, each one of the routes that we're going to add later will have to have its own different function name. So this is the code we have, and now we would like to run this code. The way we can do this, and now that we installed it, that we run FastAPI, type in dev, and then name of the file, which is main.py. If you can see it at the top, it's called main.py. So this is going to run the application in development mode, which in a second I'll explain what it means. So I tried to run this, and immediately I got an error saying address already in use. You most likely won't get this error, but I already have a separate web application that I'm playing with, and it's running on this port, the port 8000. So I need to select a different port. In order to do this, I guessed that I could use a parameter called port, but I guessed it only after I looked at the help. So I typed in FastAPI dev help. It printed out, and let me enlarge this a little bit now so we can see it. Okay, so it here printed out some help with all kind of flags that we can provide, and one of them was port. So I can give it a port number and use that way. So now I can come back to this execution and say here port, and instead of 8000, I'm going to tell it to run on port 8001. Okay, now that I run it, it doesn't complain anymore. It says that it's this unicorn is running on the local host, which is just this IP address is the same as localhost, port 8001, and it's waiting for my input. Okay, so this is now running. What basically this did is started a web server on my computer, and it's waiting for a browser to a user to visit with its browser. But it's defined in a way that it can only accept connections from my own computer. So I didn't open my computer to the old world. So I'm opening a new tab, and I typing in localhost and 8001 to get to this address. And this is what I got back. Now, this is already nicely formatted by my browser, which is a Firefox. But if I would like to see the actual raw data that was received, it looks like this. So it's exactly what I returned. If you recall it, there isn't one here for some reason. I have a typo there. It doesn't matter. We're going to fix that anyway. So this is basically the same. If I go back to the editor, I have to make it smaller. This text. Okay, this is basically what I sent here. And I can change here. Let's actually change this. This should be an exclamation mark, not just the number 1. And now what you could see is that this has, there was some movement here. Why? Because in development mode, this server actually can see or notice when something has changed, one of the files has changed, and we have basically one file here, and then we'll restart the whole thing. So if I go back to the application now and reload it, you can see that it's now already the exclamation mark. Okay, and I can go there to the raw data and see how it looked like the raw data. And I can also look at the headers showing that this was the request I sent in, and this is the response I received. One of the things that you can see that the server is called Uvicorn, which comes with this FastAPI installation, and then the content type is application JSON. So some details we can see, but these are the basics. Now, what I would like to do, something else here is not just look at it using my browser, but I would also like to use the command line to look at this. So in order to do this, I'm going to create a new terminal. So in one terminal, I have still running the whole thing. And here I can use curl HTTP localhost port 8001, and I can send in this request. And as you can see, this is the response I received. It just prints out the response that I received. Very nice. I can look at it this way without the need of a browser. Okay, so if you don't want to use your browser because you feel it's faster if you do everything here in the same terminal, in the same editor, then you can keep running it using this. Now I also have a test, and let's see what test is doing. So here is the test file. And I'll go over the test in a second, but let's run this. So if I run this with PyTest, it will try to verify that my code is correct, but I get an error. Let's enlarge this to see everything here. So I get an error. It says that the hello message hello world exclamation mark is not the same as the message hello world without an exclamation mark. So the reason for this is that in the original example I wanted to show you was I only had the text hello world without the number one and without the exclamation mark, and this was what the test was checking for. So basically now I sort of have a bug because of the exclamation mark, and I have to decide whether I want that exclamation mark or not. Let's say I do want it, so I say okay, and my expectation is going to change now, and I updated the test that I'm going to expect this one. If I run the test again, this time it's nicely everything is green and the whole test passed. So I know that my application returns the results that I was expecting. Let's go over the test quickly. This is a file which is called test something, as usual, is a standard with PyTest. We are importing something called the test client, and we are importing the application from the other file, from the main file, right? We have this main API, and from there we imported the application, this app. And then combining the test client with this app, we get something called the client. And then we can use this in our test functions. So what do we have in the test functions? You can use this as if it was a browser. Now, in order to run these tests, we don't need the browser, so it behaves as if it was a browser, but in order to run this test, we don't need a server. So let me just prove it to you. I come here and I press Ctrl+C to stop the server. Okay, so I can see that the server doesn't run anymore. I can come to the other terminal and run curl, and it will complain that it can't access that port because the server is not running anymore. That's fine. But if I run the test, it will still pass because it doesn't really run or need the server. It somehow internally pretends as if there was a server and then sends in that request to the root path of the application and gets some response. And we can then interrogate this response, checking all kind of things. One of them is the status code, which should be 200 okay in case of success, and you might know 404 when the page can't be found, and so on. So this is one thing. Then there are headers, various headers, and one that I usually like to check is the content type, making sure that I really have the correct content type. And so the default here is the content type is application JSON. If we were building an application where we are returning HTML, the content type should be different. It should be text HTML, I think that's the content type for that. Okay, so this is the header. This comes from the header. And then there's also the JSON, the actual data. But because we know or assume that it's going to be JSON, we can call this response.json, and we're already going to parse the JSON that we received and get back some Python data structure. So now we are comparing it to the expected data, which is the same as, of course, the return. Now, this seems like a bit of unnecessary duplication of the same data in both the code and in the test. But of course, if you're writing an application where the returned data is dynamic and will depend on some input, then you'll certainly won't reproduce the same thing, but you'll have a real expected data that's just in the test case. Anyway, I think I covered really the basics. Now it's your turn. If you like the video, if this helped, then first of all, start clicking the like button, thumbs up. Also follow the channel so you will get notified when I upload the next episode of this series. But most importantly, try to do everything that I did in this video. So write all the code. It would be probably better if you typed in yourself instead of copy pasting. But if you would like to copy paste, then under the video you will find a link to the actual example, actually of these examples, where you can or either download the code or copy paste from it. So thank you for watching this video, and hope to see you next time.